RiseAbsorb is redefining what growers expect from phosphate fertilizer. Backed by data and built for performance, RiseAbsorb helps reduce phosphorus losses, improve uptake, and boost ROI without increasing input costs. Join the next wave of growers switching to the next generation of phosphorus fertilizers by visiting phospholutions.com.
All right, I'm on the line now with Chris Davison. He's president and CEO of the Canola Council of Canada. Chris, a big day, not a good news day, but a big news day for the Canadian canola industry. What was announced today? Catch us up.
Yeah, what was announced today was a preliminary finding that's part of the anti-dumping investigation that China initiated last September into the imports of Canadian canola seed. And what was announced essentially is the imposition of a 75.8% duty to be collected as a deposit on imports of canola seed into China.
Now, 75.8%, first of all, a large number. Second of all, kind of an odd one. Why do we think that it is at that level? Is there any feedback as to why this number and why such a large tariff?
Yeah, look, so still very early into these this finding having been communicated, so we need to dive a little deeper into that. But I suspect that the Chinese government, in reviewing the information that was submitted as part of the investigation and whatever analysis they did, made some decisions about how to come up with that number based on the information they would have received from ourselves and other parties to the investigation. But as for the specifics of that and the rationale for that, that'll be a follow-up conversation once we understand and have a chance to go through the preliminary ruling in some detail.
So two parts to that then, of course. China is, as I say, calling this preliminary or temporary. It does seem to stem from, in this anti-dumping investigation, they refer to findings regarding subsidies of the Canadian system. Is there any indication what those subsidies may be or what China is, in particular, is taking issue with?
No, and I'm not going to speculate that other than to say I would obviously disagree with that finding. But as for the preliminary nature of this that you alluded to, there often is a preliminary finding as part of an anti-dumping investigation. This particular investigation started last September, and under the normal course of investigations, they last for a year, so it would have been due to be completed this September, although there is the possibility under certain circumstances for extension of an investigation by up to 6 months. And often a preliminary finding is found earlier in the process than what we've experienced with the announcement today. So the fact that it's preliminary is not unfounded. It's a typical part of anti-dumping investigation. But suffice to say, we're very disappointed with what was announced and particularly the significance of the duty that was announced and the impact it will have on the Canadian industry.
So further to that then, as far as the timeline goes, a year would be next month. But as you're saying, it could be another 6 months after sort of that year. So we could be looking at a final finding somewhere in the next 6 to 7 months, potentially.
Yes, that's possible. If there's a decision to extend this investigation, that would be a possibility. I would still think that we will anticipate getting some additional clarity on where things stand based on the original September timeframe. So as you alluded to, that's not very far from now. We're talking about 3 or 4 weeks from now, based on the date that this anti-dumping investigation was first initiated.
Now, this is, of course, on canola seed. We did see China extend tariffs onto Canadian meal and canola oil. This sort of rounds out the trifecta then. What are we talking as far as value into China? I know meal and oil were, the lower of the value that would go into China. Canola seed being the largest. So what kind of value are we talking about would typically go into China that could be subject to this tariff?
Yeah, look, this is a market that was valued at $4.9 billion in 2024. It's the second largest export market for the Canadian canola industry in terms of its economic value. In terms of the breakdown of those exports, about $4 billion are tied to the export of seed, another $920 million plus or minus to meal, and then another $20 million plus or minus related to oil, based on 2024 activity. So a very, very significant market. We've talked about China being a highly valued market and that the Canadian canola industry for many years and will continue to work hard to meet the needs of Chinese customers and China's food security needs. But with this finding and the imposition of a 75.8% duty on canola seed, together with the existing 100% duties on Canadian canola oil and meal, this will effectively close the Chinese market to the Canadian canola industry.
Now, this is set to take effect August 14th, just in 2 days. What is the Canola Council asking the Canadian government to do at this time?
Yeah, look, I think there's two main things. One is we absolutely have to double down on our efforts to resolve these trade issues. We all know that Canada-China relations has come through an extended period of time where those relations have not been particularly good. We were encouraged by some modest but recent developments that had increased engagement between Canada and China. And clearly we need to double down and redouble those efforts. We've been very clear that this is a political issue and it needs a political solution. So that is a big part of the ask to the Canadian government. The second ask really relates to support for the Canadian industry. This is an industry that contributes about $44 billion annually to the Canadian economy. It accounts for more than 200,000 jobs and $16 billion in wages. It is quite frankly an economic powerhouse. And we are facing sort of, potentially an unprecedented closure of this market. And so we are going to need appropriate support from the Government of Canada. And, that will, from our position, take a couple of forms. There will be financial support specifically, and then we'll see what other supports may be appropriate in terms of policy or programming. But absolutely, the magnitude of this is very significant.
Mm-hmm. All right. Chris Davison, President and CEO of the Canola Council of Canada, thank you so much for taking time today.
Thanks for having me, Lindsay.